The morning sun barely broke through the thick gray clouds hanging over the ruins of Seoul. Hannah crouched behind a broken concrete wall, her dark eyes scanning the empty street ahead. She had been hunting for 3 hours now, and her stomach reminded her with a sharp pain that she needed to find food soon. At 19 years old, Hannah had survived in these ruins for most of her life. The Great War had ended before she was born, but its effects still poisoned the land. Most of the old city lay in rubble, with twisted metal and broken glass scattered everywhere. Strange plants grew between the cracks in the pavement, their leaves glowing faintly in colors that nature never intended. Hannah adjusted the makeshift bow slung across her shoulder. She had crafted it herself from salvaged materials, just like everything else she owned. Her clothes were patches of different fabrics sewn together. Her boots were military surplus, too big for her feet, but still better than walking barefoot on the sharp debris that covered every surface. She heard a sound and froze. It was not the scurrying of the small creatures she usually hunted. It was something bigger, moving with purpose through the ruins. Hannah pressed herself against the wall and listened carefully. The sound came again, metal scraping against stone. Then voices, speaking in a language she did not recognize. The words were harsh and seemed to click in strange ways that human throats could not make. Hannah had heard stories about the visitors from the sky. The survivors sometimes whispered about strange ships that appeared without warning, taking people away to places unknown. She had always thought these were just stories meant to frighten children. She was wrong. The first alien came around the corner of a collapsed building. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, with gray skin that looked like rough leather. Its arms were too long for its body, ending in hands with 4 fingers each. Where its face should be, there was something that looked like a mix between an insect and a reptile. Multiple eyes clustered around a mouth full of sharp teeth. Behind it came 3 more of the same species, all carrying weapons that hummed with electric energy. They moved with the confidence of hunters who had never known fear. Hannah's heart pounded as she realized what was happening. These aliens were not here by accident. They were searching for something, or someone. The lead alien stopped and made a series of clicking sounds. The others spread out, beginning to search the ruins systematically. Hannah knew she had to move, but she also knew that running blindly would only get her caught. She had learned long ago that the key to survival was not strength or speed, but thinking clearly when others panicked. While the aliens searched the larger buildings, Hannah began moving through the smaller spaces between the ruins. She used drainage pipes and narrow gaps that the larger aliens could not fit through. For 20 minutes, she managed to stay ahead of them. She began to think she might escape when she heard new sounds from behind her. More aliens, coming from the direction of her settlement. Hannah's blood went cold. Her settlement was home to 12 other survivors, including elderly people and children. If these aliens had found them, she changed direction, moving toward the settlement despite every survival instinct telling her to run the other way. As she got closer, she could smell smoke and hear the sounds of fighting. Hannah reached the edge of the settlement and saw a scene that filled her with rage. The aliens had surrounded the small group of crude shelters that her people called home. Several humans lay motionless on the ground. The survivors had been forced into a group in the center of the settlement, their hands bound behind their backs. She counted 8 aliens total, all carrying the same humming weapons. One of them, slightly larger than the others and wearing what looked like armor, was examining the prisoners. This one spoke to the others in their clicking language, occasionally pointing at different humans. Hannah knew she could not fight 8 armed aliens and win, but she also could not just watch her people be taken away. She needed to find another way. She studied the aliens' positions and noticed something interesting. They were confident, almost casual. They did not expect any resistance from the primitive humans. This confidence might be their weakness. Hannah moved carefully around the settlement's edge until she found what she was looking for. The settlement's water supply came from a well that connected to an underground stream. Next to the well was a small shed where they stored their tools and supplies. She slipped into the shed and quickly gathered what she needed. 3 small containers of the fuel they used for their generators, a handful of metal scraps, some wire, and most importantly, a timing device salvaged from an old military explosive. Hannah had learned about explosives from an old soldier who had died the previous winter. He had taught her that sometimes the best weapon was not the biggest one, but the one your enemy did not expect. She worked quickly, creating 3 crude but effective explosive devices. Then she positioned them carefully around the settlement's edge, in places where the aliens would likely take cover if they came under attack. The hard part was getting close enough to the aliens to start the fight. Hannah picked up her bow and selected her best arrow. It was not much against alien weapons, but it would have to do. She aimed for the largest alien, the one who seemed to be in charge. The arrow flew true, striking the creature in the shoulder. It roared in pain and anger, spinning around to look for the source of the attack. Hannah was already moving, diving behind a pile of rubble as energy beams sizzled through the air where she had been standing. The aliens shouted to each other in their clicking language, spreading out to hunt for her. This was exactly what she had hoped for. As the aliens moved to search for her, they positioned themselves near her hidden explosives. Hannah waited until they were in the right positions, then triggered the first device. The explosion was not large, but it was loud and unexpected. The aliens nearest to it fell to the ground, their strange blood staining the dirt. The others turned toward the sound, confused and angry. Hannah triggered the second explosive, then the third. The aliens were now scattered and disoriented, no longer working as a coordinated team. Some were wounded, others were trying to help their fallen companions. Now came the dangerous part. Hannah had to get close enough to the remaining aliens to free her people, but she had no more explosives and only a few arrows left. She moved from cover to cover, using the smoke and confusion to get closer to the group of prisoners. One of the aliens spotted her and raised his weapon, but Hannah was ready. She rolled to the side and came up with an arrow already fitted to her bow. The arrow took the alien in the center of its cluster of eyes. It dropped his weapon and fell backward, making horrible clicking sounds. 2 aliens remained, both wounded but still dangerous. They stood between Hannah and her people, their weapons raised and ready. Hannah knew she had one chance. She dropped her bow and picked up the weapon from the fallen alien. It was heavy and strangely shaped, but the trigger was obvious enough. The first energy beam she fired went wide, but it was close enough to make the aliens duck for cover. The second beam hit one of them in the chest, sending it sprawling. The last alien, the leader, turned its weapon toward the prisoners. Hannah realized with horror that it was going to kill them rather than let them be rescued. She did not think, she acted. Hannah threw herself forward, tackling the large alien before it could fire. They rolled on the ground, fighting for control of the weapon. The alien was stronger than she was, but Hannah was faster and more desperate. She managed to turn the weapon around and pulled the trigger. The energy beam struck the alien at close range, and it stopped moving. Hannah stood up slowly, her hands shaking. Around her, the settlement was quiet, except for the moaning of the wounded. She had won, but at a terrible cost. 3 of her people were dead, and she knew that more aliens would come looking for the ones who had not returned. As she cut the ropes binding the other survivors, Hannah realized that everything had changed. The aliens knew about them now. They would return with more ships and more weapons. Her people were no longer safe in their hidden settlement. They were no longer safe anywhere on Earth, but they were alive, and as long as they were alive, they could fight. 3 days later, the sky above Seoul filled with alien ships. They came in the early morning when most survivors were still sleeping. The ships were silent, appearing like dark shadows against the gray clouds. Hannah had prepared her people as best she could. They had scattered into the deepest parts of the ruins, hiding in places she hoped the aliens could not find. She had given them instructions to stay hidden no matter what happened, but the aliens had learned from their previous failure. This time, they brought scanners that could detect human heartbeats through solid rock. One by one, the hiding survivors were found and captured. Hannah was the last to be taken. She had positioned herself in the most dangerous part of the ruins, where unstable buildings threatened to collapse at any moment. The aliens had to send in their smallest scouts to reach her. When they finally cornered her, Hannah did not surrender. Quietly, she had prepared the area with traps and had armed herself with every weapon she could carry. The fight lasted for over an hour. By the time they subdued her, Hannah had killed 3 more aliens and wounded several others. The surviving aliens looked at her with something that might have been respect, or perhaps fear. The alien commander who oversaw her capture was different from the others. He was taller and his skin was darker, almost black. His armor was more elaborate, and the other aliens clearly deferred to his authority. This commander, who Hannah would later learn was called Vel, studied her carefully as she was dragged before him in restraints. "This small creature killed 6 of my warriors," he said in accented but understandable human language. "How is this possible?" Hannah glared at him but said nothing. She had decided that cooperation would only make things easier for her captors. Vel circled around her, examining her like she was some kind of interesting specimen. "Your species is listed in our databases as primitive, pre-spaceflight, limited technology. Yet you fight like a creature from a death world." One of the other aliens made clicking sounds that seemed urgent. Val listened, then looked back at Hannah with what might have been surprise. "My subordinate reminds me that your planet is indeed classified as a death world," Val said. "Class 12, if the records are correct. I have forgotten. Most death world species are large and obviously dangerous. You are neither." Hannah remained silent, but she filed away this information. Her planet was classified as dangerous by these aliens. That might be useful to know. Vel made a decision. "You are too dangerous for standard slave work, but too valuable to simply execute. I know of a place where creatures like you might prove profitable." The transport to the Crimson Pits took 2 weeks. Hannah was kept in a small cell with barely enough room to stand up. The aliens gave her just enough food and water to keep her alive, but nothing more. During the journey, she learned what she could about her captors and their language. The guards sometimes talked near her cell, not realizing that she was listening and learning. Human brains were apparently much better at language acquisition than most species expected. She discovered that she was being taken to a gladiatorial arena where dangerous creatures from across the galaxy were forced to fight for entertainment. The mortality rate was nearly 100%. Most creatures died within days of arrival. The ship that carried her held other prisoners as well. She could hear them sometimes, roaring or clicking or making sounds she had no names for. Whatever they were, they sounded large and angry. When the ship finally reached its destination, Hannah got her first look at the Crimson Pits. It was a massive space station built into an asteroid. The central arena was surrounded by viewing areas where wealthy aliens could watch the fights in comfort and safety. Below the arena was a complex network of tunnels and chambers where the fighting creatures were kept. It was into these depths that Hannah was dragged. The alien who ran the arena was called Kale. He was yet another species, this one resembling a giant insect with too many arms. When he saw Hannah, he made a sound that might have been laughter. "A human," he said in Galactic, "Common, the trade language used throughout this part of space. From Earth, no less. How delightfully unexpected. Kale walked around Hannah, studying her from different angles. You do realize, small creature, that the average survival time in my arena is less than one standard day. Most creatures are killed. In their first fight, Hannah met his gaze steadily. Then, I guess I had better not be average. This seemed to amuse Kale even more. Excellent. I do so enjoy confidence in my gladiators. It makes their deaths more entertaining for the audience. He gestured to his guards. Take her to the holding areas. Let her see what she will be fighting against. Perhaps it will inspire her to put on a good show before she dies. The holding areas were worse than anything Hannah had imagined. The tunnels were filled with cages and pens containing creatures from dozens of different worlds. Most were clearly predators, built for killing and designed by evolution to be perfect hunters in one cage. Something that looked like a walking crystal formation paced back and forth. Its body caught and reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at directly when it moved. The air around it grew cold enough to form frost on the metal bars. Another pen held creatures that seemed to be made of living shadow. They had no fixed shape, flowing like liquid darkness from one form to another. Sometimes they looked almost human. Other times they resembled nightmares. The third area contained what appeared to be a small mountain of flesh covered in acid dripping. Spines. When it breathed, poisonous gas leaked from vents along its sides. The metal floor around its pen was pitted and scarred from the corrosive substances it produced. As Hannah was led deeper into the complex, she began to understand the full scope of what she faced. These were not just dangerous animals. They were the apex predators of their respective worlds, creatures so deadly that entire civilizations feared them, and she was expected to fight them with nothing but her bare hands and whatever crude weapons she could improvise. The guards threw her into a small cell carved directly from the asteroid rock. The only light came from a dim panel in the ceiling. The only furniture was a thin mat on the floor and a bucket in the corner. As the guards left, one of them said something in their language that made the others laugh. Hannah did not need a translation to understand the meaning. They were betting on how quickly she would die. She sat down on the mat and began to think. The situation seemed impossible, but Hannah had faced impossible situations before. The key was not to focus on the size of the problem, but to break it down into smaller, manageable pieces. First, she needed to survive her initial encounters long enough to learn about her opponents. Second, she needed to find ways to gain advantages that did not depend on size or strength. Third, she needed to identify potential allies among the other prisoners. As she sat in the darkness, Hannah heard a sound from the cell next to hers. It was quiet, almost whispered, but it was speaking in Korean. "Hello," the voice said. "Are you human too?" Hannah moved closer to the wall that separated their cells. "Yes, my name is Hannah. Who are you?" "I am Rin," the voice replied. "Park Rin. I have been here for 3 months. I thought I was the only human in this place." Hannah felt a surge of hope. She was not alone after all. "How have you survived for 3 months?" There was a long pause before Ren answered. "I've been very careful, very quiet, and very lucky. Most of the creatures here ignore anything that seems too small to be worth eating. I scavenge, and I stay out of the way of the big fights. Have you learned anything about this place that might help us?" Another pause. "Some things. The creatures here are not just random monsters. They have territories, hierarchies, alliances. You can understand the social structure. You might be able to find a place in it." Hannah nodded, even though Ren could not see her. This was valuable information. 8. The arena was not just a place of random violence. It was a complex ecosystem with rules and relationships. "There is something else," Ren continued. "Tomorrow, they will put you in the arena for your first fight. It is supposed to be a test to see what you can do. Most new arrivals die during this test. What will I be fighting? I do not know for certain. Okay. But I have heard the guards talking. They think it will be amusing to watch a human fight one of the crystal hunters. They believe you will be frozen solid before you can even move. Kana smiled grimly in the darkness. The aliens were about to learn that humans had been dealing with cold for thousands of years. They had no idea what Earth winters were like, or how humans had learned to survive in conditions that would kill most other species. She began to plan. The next morning came too soon. Hannah woke to the sound of guards approaching her cell. Through the small window in her door, she could see alien spectators already filling the viewing areas above the arena floor. Time for your debut, little human, one of the guards said as they opened her cell door. Try to make it entertaining before you die. They dragged her through a series of tunnels that led to the arena floor. As they walked, Hannah studied everything she could see: the walls, the lighting, the sounds that echoed from different directions. All of it might be useful later. The arena itself was larger than she had expected. The floor was covered with sand that had been stained dark red by the blood of countless previous fights. Around the edges were scattered rocks, broken weapons from past battles, and small alcoves where a fighter might take temporary shelter. In the center of the arena stood her opponent. The crystal hunter was even more terrifying up close than it had been in its cage. It stood nearly 8 feet tall and was made entirely of what looked like living ice. Its body was angular and sharp, with edges that could cut through metal. Its eyes were clusters of blue light that tracked her movement as she entered the arena. The crowd of alien spectators grew quiet as they waited to see what the small human would do. Most expected her to run or cower in fear. Few had bet on how quickly she would be killed. Hannah disappointed them all. Instead of showing fear, she began to walk slowly around the arena's edge, keeping her distance from the crystal hunter while studying it carefully. The creature followed her movement, turning to keep her in sight. As it moved, Hannah noticed several important things. Its feet cracked the stone floor with each step, suggesting it was much heavier than it looked. Its movements were smooth, but not particularly fast, and, most importantly, it made a low humming sound as it moved. That humming sound gave Hannah an idea. She had learned about resonance, its frequencies, during her years of salvaging old electronics. In Seoul, every material had a natural frequency at which it would vibrate. If you could match that frequency and amplify it, you could cause the material to break apart. The crystal hunter was essentially a large, complex crystal formation. It had to have a resonance frequency. The problem was figuring out what that frequency was and how to generate it without any equipment. Hannah continued circling the arena, forcing the creature to keep turning to follow her. As she moved, she began to sing. It was a simple tune, starting low and gradually rising in pitch. The crowd began to murmur in confusion. What was the human doing? Was this some kind of death song from her primitive culture? The crystal hunter seemed equally confused. He had been expecting the human to attack, or at least to run away. Instead, she was walking in circles and making strange noises. Hannah kept singing, slowly adjusting the pitch and volume of her voice. She watched the crystal hunter carefully, looking for any sign that her voice was having an effect. When she reached a certain high note, she saw it. The creature's body flickered slightly, as if the light within it had briefly dimmed. She was getting close to the right frequency. The crystal hunter, apparently tired of this strange behavior, decided to attack. It moved faster than Hannah had expected, crossing half the arena in just a few steps. Where its feet touched the ground, the sand turned to ice. Hannah rolled to the side, barely avoiding the creature's grasping arms. She could feel the cold radiating from its body as it passed near her. If it managed to grab her, she would be frozen solid in seconds. But now she had learned something else important. The creature moved in straight lines, was fast, but it could not change direction quickly. This gave her an advantage if she could use it properly. Hannah ran toward one of the rock formations at the edge of the arena, the crystal hunter pursuing her. Just before she reached the rocks, she dove to the side. The creature, unable to stop quickly, slammed into the stone formation with tremendous force. The impact sent vibrations through the arena floor. Hannah felt them through her feet and heard them echo off the walls. The arena had excellent acoustics, designed to carry the sounds of battle to every spectator. This gave her the tools she needed. Hannah climbed onto one of the larger rocks and began to sing again. This time, she was not just trying to find the right frequency. She was using the arena's acoustics to amplify her voice, creating a feedback loop that made the sound much louder and more focused. The crystal hunter turned toward her, its glowing eyes blazing with anger. It began to climb the rock formation, its sharp edges easily finding handholds in the stone. Hannah adjusted her voice, hitting the exact note that had caused the creature to flicker before. But now, amplified by the arena's design, the sound was much more powerful. The crystal hunter stopped climbing. Kate's entire body began to vibrate in rhythm with Hannah's voice. The blue light within it flickered more rapidly. Hannah took a deep breath and sang louder, pushing her voice to its limits. The sound echoed and re-echoed around the arena, building on itself until it became a wall of noise focused directly at the crystal hunter. The creature tried to continue climbing. Its movements became erratic. Cracks began to appear in its crystalline structure. The blue light within it started to pulse irregularly. The crowd fell completely silent. They had never seen anything like this before. Hannah sang one final sustained note with every bit of strength she possessed. The sound filled the arena like thunder. The crystal hunter's body shattered. It happened all at once. It's like a window breaking in slow motion. The creature fell apart into thousands of glittering fragments that scattered across the arena floor. The blue light that had given it life flickered once and went out. Hannah collapsed on the rock, her throat raw and her lungs burning. But she was alive, and her opponent was not. The arena remained silent for several long seconds. Then, slowly, the alien spectators began to make noise. T was not cheering exactly, but something like amazed disbelief. Hannah had won her first fight, and she had done it in a way that no one had expected or seen before. As the guards came to escort her back to her cell, Hannah caught sight of something interesting. In one of the viewing areas, a reptilian creature was watching her with what appeared to be intense interest. Unlike the other spectators, this one did not seem surprised by her victory. Instead, it looked thoughtful, as if it was evaluating her performance. This creature, she would later learn, was called Dax. He was not a spectator, but a prisoner like herself, temporarily allowed to watch the fights as a reward for his own victories in the arena. And he was looking at Hannah as if he saw something in her that the others had missed. Back in her cell, Ren was waiting with obvious relief. "I heard the crowd," he said through the wall. "You survived." "How?" Hannah told him about the fight, explaining her use of resonance frequencies and arena acoustics. Ren listened in amazement. "That was brilliant," he said when she finished. "But you realize what this means, don't you?" "What?" "They will not underestimate you again. Your next fight will be much harder." Hannah nodded. She had expected this, but she had also learned something important during her first battle. The arena was not just a place of random violence. It was a complex environment that could be understood and used by someone smart enough to figure out its rules. More importantly, she had proven to herself that humans could compete here, not through strength or natural weapons, but through intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to see solutions that others missed. The next few days brought a steady stream of visitors to the area near her cell. Other prisoners, guards, even some of the arena staff came to look at the human who had defeated the crystal hunter with nothing but her voice. Most seemed curious, but wary. A few appeared hostile, perhaps viewing her as a threat to the established order. But one visitor was different. On the third day after her fight, Hana woke to find the reptilian creature she had noticed in the viewing area standing outside her cell. Up close, she could see that he was about her own height, but much more heavily built. His scales were dark green, with lighter patterns, and his eyes were intelligent and calculating. "You are the human," he said in accented galactic common. "Am," Hana replied. "And you are?" "I am called Dax. I have been watching you." "Why?" Dax was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Because you fight like a hunter, not like prey. Most creatures that come here fight with fear or anger. You fight with your mind." Hana moved closer to the cell door. "Is that unusual?" "It's very unusual. Most predators rely on natural advantages: size, speed, venom, claws. You used the arena itself as a weapon. That shows real intelligence. What do you want?" Dax looked around to make sure no guards were nearby, then spoke quietly. "I want to make you an offer. There are ways to survive in this place beyond just winning fights. Ways to gain advantages that the arena masters do not expect, such as alliances, territories, information. The arena is more complex than it appears on the surface. Those who understand this complexity can thrive, not just survive." Tana considered. Everything Dax said matched what she had observed and what Ren had told her. The arena was an ecosystem, and like any ecosystem, it could be influenced by someone who understood its workings. 2 weeks after her victory over the Crystal Hunter, Hana had made her decision about Dax's offer. She agreed to work with him, but only after testing his trustworthiness in small ways first. Their first joint operation was simple. The shadow beasts that Hana had seen in the holding areas had taken over a section of the arena complex that Dax's pack had once controlled. These creatures could phase through solid matter, making them nearly impossible to fight using conventional methods. But Hana had noticed something during her time observing them. The shadow beasts became solid when they attacked. For just a moment, they had to take physical form to cause damage. "The timing has to be perfect," she explained to Dax as they prepared their plan. "When they solidify to strike, that is when they are vulnerable." Dax listened carefully. He had lost 3 members of his pack to these creatures. "How do we force them to attack when we want them to?" "We make them angry," Hana said, "and we give them a target they cannot resist." The plan was risky. Hana would enter the shadow beast's territory alone, making herself appear vulnerable and defenseless. When the creatures moved to attack her, Dax and his remaining pack members would strike from concealment. It worked better than either of them had hoped. The shadow beasts took the bait immediately. They flowed toward Hana like living darkness, their forms shifting and changing as they moved. Just as they reached her and solidified to attack, Dax's pack emerged from hiding places around the chamber. The battle was short but intense. 3 shadow beasts were killed before the others retreated deeper into the complex. Dax's pack had reclaimed their territory. "You fight like a pack leader," Dax told Hana afterward. "But you think like something more." Word of their success spread quickly through the arena complex. Other prisoners began to take notice of the human who could plan tactics that actually worked against creatures that had seemed unbeatable. More importantly, new human prisoners began arriving. The first was Kim Yoon, an engineer who had been captured during a raid on a human research station. He was older than Hana, with gray hair and hands that bore the calluses of someone who worked with machinery. "I heard there was another human here," he said when the guards brought him to the cell next to Hana's. "I thought the rumors were just wishful thinking." Yoon brought valuable skills. Within days of his arrival, he had begun creating tools and weapons from scavenged materials found throughout the complex. His first creation was a simple but effective spear for Hannah, made from a metal rod and a sharpened piece of crystal from her defeated opponent. The guards do not watch the maintenance areas very carefully, Yoon explained as he worked. There are all kinds of useful materials just lying around. Electronics, chemical compounds, everything an engineer needs. It's a second new arrival. Was OJ, a former military officer who had been leading resistance operations on a human colony world. He was quiet and observant, with the kind of calm confidence that came from years of combat experience. Jay immediately understood what Hannah and Dax were trying to accomplish. "You are building an organization," he said, after observing their operations for several days. "But you are thinking too small." "What do you mean?" Hannah asked. "You are focused on survival and small territorial gains. But look around you. This place contains some of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. If they could be organized and directed properly, they could be turned into a formidable force." Kay began studying the other prisoners systematically, learning their capabilities, their social structures, and their motivations. He identified potential allies and threats, mapping out the complex web of relationships that existed within the arena. "The acid spitters from the volcanic worlds are territorial, but not aggressive and less threatened," he reported to Hannah. "They could be valuable allies if approached correctly. The telepathic stalkers are more dangerous, but they respect strength and cunning. If you could defeat their leader in combat, the rest might follow you." The third human to arrive was Song, Nara, a medic who had been captured while treating wounded civilians on a frontier world. She was small and quiet, but she possessed knowledge that proved invaluable in their harsh environment. "Most of these creatures have never received proper medical treatment," she explained as she tended to a wounded member of Dax's pack. "They are used to either healing naturally or dying. Simple wound care and basic medicine seem like miracles to them." Nara's treatment created a new kind of loyalty among the prisoners. Creatures that had never trusted anyone outside their own species began to see the humans as valuable allies. Her medical skills gave Hannah's growing coalition an advantage that no other group in the arena possessed. As their influence grew, so did the attention they received from the arena masters. Kill began making changes to the fighting schedules and rules, clearly trying to disrupt the humans' growing power base. "He is worried," Dax observed, after several of their allies were forced into unexpected fights against each other. "The arena masters profit from chaos and violence. Organization threatens their business model." Okay. The situation came to a head when Kale decided to test Hannah directly. He arranged for her to face the current arena champion in single combat. If she won, she would officially become the new champion. If she lost, she would be dead, and her growing coalition would likely fall apart. The champion was a massive telepathic stalker, known as the Mindrender. It stood 12 feet tall and had the ability to read its opponent's thoughts, predicting their moves before they made them. It had held the championship for over 2 years and had never been seriously challenged. "This is not just about winning a fight," Jay warned Hannah as she prepared for the battle. "This is about proving that humans can lead here. If you lose, everything we have built will collapse." Hannah understood the stakes, but she also understood something that Kale did not. The Mindrender's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. The creature could read thoughts, but it had become dependent on that ability. It expected to know what its opponents were thinking at all times. Predictability could be used against it. Hannah spent 3 days preparing for the fight, not by training her body, but by training her mind. She practiced meditation techniques that allowed her to control her thoughts. Think about one thing while planning to do something completely different. When the day of the fight arrived, the arena was more crowded than it had been in months. Word had spread throughout the station that the human was challenging the champion. Even wealthy spectators who rarely attended fights had come to see this unprecedented event. The Mindrender entered the arena with confident, flowing movements. It was a beautiful creature in its own terrifying way, with smooth gray skin and large black eyes that seemed to look directly into a person's soul. Hannah entered from the opposite side, carrying only the spear that Yoon had made for her. She looked small and fragile compared to her massive opponent. The fight began with the mind render probing Hannah's thoughts, trying to understand her strategy. But instead of finding a clear battle plan, it encountered something unexpected. Hannah was thinking about her childhood in Seoul, remembering the taste of her mother's cooking and the sound of rain on the roof of their old shelter. Confused by these irrelevant thoughts, the mind render moved closer, extending its mental probe deeper. This was exactly what Hannah had hoped for, while her conscious mind filled with peaceful memories. Her trained subconscious was observing and planning. She noted the creature's movement patterns, its balance points, and the way it positioned itself. When using its telepathic abilities, the mind render, still puzzled by her mental state, decided to attack physically. It moved forward with surprising speed for such a large creature, its clawed hands reaching for her. Hannah's body reacted with movements she had drilled into muscle memory, completely separate from her conscious thoughts. She rolled to the side and struck with her spear, aiming for a nerve cluster that Nara had identified in the creature's anatomy. The mind render roared in pain and surprise. How had the human known exactly where to strike? It had read her thoughts and found nothing about anatomy or weak points. Hannah continued her mental deception, thinking about her friends in the arena while her trained reflexes guided her movements. She struck again, this time hitting a pressure point that temporarily disrupted the creature's telepathic abilities without its mental advantages. The mind render was just a large, strong creature fighting against an opponent who had studied it carefully and planned for this exact situation. The battle lasted for 20 minutes. When it ended, the mind render lay motionless on the arena floor, and Hannah stood over it, exhausted but victorious. The crowd was completely silent for several seconds. Then, slowly, sounds began to emerge from the viewing areas, not cheering, but something like amazed disbelief mixed with fear. A human had just defeated the arena's champion. A small creature from a primitive world had outfought and outfought one of the galaxy's most feared predators. As the guards escorted her from the arena, Hannah caught sight of Kale in his viewing box. The arena master was staring at her with what could only be described as concern. Becoming arena champion changed everything for Hannah and her allies. As champion, she was given better quarters, more food, and most importantly, greater freedom to move around the complex. But she also became a bigger target. Kale began making new rules specifically designed to break up the human coalition. Fights were scheduled to force allied creatures to battle each other. Food distributions were changed to create conflicts over resources. New security measures made it harder for different groups to communicate. "He is trying to divide us," Jay observed during one of their secret meetings. "If he can turn our allies against each other, our organization will collapse from within." But Kale had underestimated how much the arena's social dynamics had already changed. The other prisoners had seen what cooperation could accomplish. They were no longer willing to return to the old system of constant fear and mindless violence. More importantly, new arrivals kept coming, and many of them were human. Jungbo was a pilot who had been captured when his cargo ship was attacked by slavers. Su was a diplomat who had been taken during peace negotiations with an alien government. Each new human brought different skills and knowledge that strengthened the growing resistance movement. "We cannot just think about escaping," Su argued during one of their planning sessions. "Even if we get out, what about all the other prisoners who will be brought here after we are gone? What about other arenas like this one scattered across the galaxy?" This perspective changed how Hannah thought about their situation. They were not just prisoners trying to escape. They were witnesses to a system of cruelty that existed throughout this part of space. If they could expose it and fight against it, they might prevent countless other beings from suffering the same fate. The opportunity for action came sooner than expected. A new shipment of prisoners arrived, including creatures that had never been seen in the arena before. Among them were several species that possessed technical knowledge about spaceship operations and interstellar communications. If we could get access to the arena's communication systems, Bo suggested, we could send messages to other parts of the galaxy. Let people know what is happening here. Yoon had been studying the station's infrastructure for months. The main communication array is heavily protected, but there are maintenance access points that might be vulnerable. If we could create a distraction large enough, we might be able to reach it. The plan they developed was ambitious and dangerous. It would require coordinating multiple groups of prisoners, timing their actions perfectly, and fighting their way through heavily armed security forces. But it would also send a message to every slave-taking organization in the galaxy. The creatures they captured and tormented could fight back. The uprising began during the evening meal period, when most of the guards were relaxed and off duty. Hannah had used her position as champion to gather intelligence about guard rotations, security protocols, and the layout of areas that prisoners normally never saw. The first phase was a series of coordinated breakouts from the holding areas. Yoon's improvised explosives disabled the electronic locks on dozens of cages simultaneously. Within minutes, some of the galaxy's most dangerous predators were loose throughout the station. But instead of attacking randomly, they moved according to Jay's carefully planned strategy. Each group had specific objectives. Some secured key corridors to prevent reinforcements from reaching critical areas. Others disabled security systems and power distribution nodes. The arena guards had never faced anything like this before. They were used to dealing with individual escaped prisoners, not a coordinated military operation led by creatures that understood tactics and strategy. Hannah led a strike team toward the communication array, fighting through increasingly desperate resistance as the station's security forces realized what was happening. Dax and his pack provided cover while Nara treated the wounded and kept the team moving forward. The battle for the communication center was fierce. The guards there knew that if the prisoners reached the array, word of the arena's existence would spread throughout the galaxy. They fought with the desperation of beings who knew their entire way of life was at stake, but they were outnumbered and facing opponents who had been forged by months or years of survival in the most dangerous environment imaginable. When the last guard fell, Bo and Yoon rushed to the communication controls. I can reach at least 12 different news networks, Bo reported as he worked frantically at the alien controls. Military channels too, and several government frequencies. Send everything, Hannah ordered. Locations, prisoner counts, the names of everyone involved in running this place. Make sure the galaxy knows what has been happening here. As the messages went out, the second phase of the uprising began. Instead of simply trying to escape, the freed prisoners began taking control of the entire station. They captured the docking bays where ships brought new prisoners and supplies. They seized the power generators that kept the station operating. Most importantly, they captured Kale and his senior staff. The arena master, when brought before Hannah in chains, looked at her with undisguised hatred. "You have doomed yourself and everyone with you," he said. "The Krelian Empire will send warships to retake this station. They will kill every prisoner here rather than let this rebellion succeed." Hannah looked at him calmly. "Let them come. We are ready." She was not bluffing. In the weeks following her championship victory, the human coalition had been preparing for exactly this possibility. They had studied the station's defensive systems, trained volunteer fighters from among the prisoners, and developed plans for defending their new territory. When the Krelian fleet arrived 3 days later, they found something they had never expected. The crimson pits had been transformed from a gladiatorial arena into a fortress controlled by the most dangerous collection of predators the galaxy had ever seen, led by creatures who understood both warfare and organization. The space battle that followed lasted for 6 hours. The Krelian ships were larger and better armed, but they were crewed by beings who had never faced opponents like these. The freed prisoners fought with the fury of those who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Bo, using captured fighter ships, lead aerial attacks that targeted the Krelian command vessels. Creatures that had been apex predators on their home worlds used their natural abilities to infiltrate and sabotage enemy ships that tried to dock with the station. Most importantly, Hannah's messages had reached their intended targets. As the battle raged, ships from other parts of the galaxy began arriving. News organizations wanted to document the story. Military forces from species that had lost members to slavers came to offer support. Even some Krelian citizens, horrified by what they learned about the arena system, arrived to help the rebels. When the Krelian admiral finally called for a ceasefire, it was facing not just a single station full of prisoners, but a growing coalition of species and organizations united against the slave trade. The negotiations that followed established something unprecedented in this part of the galaxy. The Free Predator Coalition became a recognized political entity with Hannah as its leader. The Crimson Pit Station became their headquarters. It's transformed from a place of death into a refuge for escaped slaves and a coordination center for anti-slavery operations. More importantly, the uprising inspired similar rebellions throughout Krelian space. Other arenas were attacked and liberated. Slave ships were captured and their prisoners freed. The entire foundation of the slave trade began to crumble as its victims learned that resistance was possible. 6 months after the uprising, Hannah stood in what had once been Kale's private viewing box, now converted into a command center for coalition operations. Through the transparent walls, she could see the arena floor below. No longer stained with blood, but instead serving as a meeting place where representatives from dozens of species planned their next operations. Sue approached her with a communication tablet. "We just received a message from Earth," he said. "The coalition's success has inspired human colonies throughout this sector. 3 more worlds have declared independence from their alien occupiers." Hannah nodded, but her expression remained serious. "This is just the beginning. The slave trade has existed for centuries. It will take years, maybe decades, to eliminate it completely. But it can be done," Dax said, joining their conversation. "You have proven that. No matter how powerful the oppressors think they are, they can be defeated if their victims learn to work together." Hannah looked out at the diverse group of beings working together in the arena below. Crystalline hunters planned operations alongside shadow beasts. Acid-spitting behemoths shared intelligence with the telepathic stalkers. Humans provided the coordination and strategic thinking that held it all together. It was not the life she had planned when she was scavenging in the ruins of Sol, but it was a life that mattered, one that made a difference not just for herself, but for countless others throughout the galaxy. The girl who had been thrown to the apex predators had indeed become their queen. But more than that, she had become something the galaxy had never seen before. A leader who proved that the greatest strength was not in domination, but in the ability to unite the unwilling under a common cause.